Welcome to my channel. Listen to my stories every day. Comment, like and subscribe to my channel. Enjoy listening.
My name is Peter. I'm 29 years old and recently divorced. My life had been a roller coaster of emotions, especially after what I discovered during a seemingly perfect vacation. It was a sunny morning on the coast, the air filled with the scent of salt and freedom. My wife, Jessica, and I had been looking forward to this getaway for months. Little did I know, it would be the trip that unraveled everything. Jessica and I had arrived at the beachfront hotel with high hopes. The ocean shimmered under the golden rays of the sun, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore was like a lullaby. We spent our days swimming, sunbathing, and exploring the nearby attractions. In the evenings, Jessica would head to the hotel bar for a drink while I preferred to stay sober, savoring the tranquility of the sea. One evening, I noticed she spent more time at the bar than usual. I shrugged it off, thinking she needed some space. Jessica was always the life of the party, and I loved that about her. But that night, something felt different. As I lay in bed, I wondered if I should go check on her. Eventually, I decided against it, trusting her completely. A trust that was about to be shattered. Early the next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. The cool sheets beside me sent a shiver down my spine. I assumed she was hungover and had gone to the bar for some water or maybe a morning cocktail. With a mix of worry and curiosity, I decided to go find her. The bar was deserted, the silence almost eerie. My eyes scanned the room, but there was no sign of Jessica. A faint noise from the back room caught my attention. The door was slightly ajar, and as I approached, my heart began to race. What I saw next froze me in my tracks. There, amidst the clinking of glasses and hushed whispers, was Jessica, entwined with the bartender. The look of pleasure on her face, his hands roaming her body, it was like a scene from a nightmare. I felt a surge of anger, betrayal, and humiliation all at once. My mind screamed for me to burst in, to confront them, but my body remained rooted to the spot. Instead, I backed away slowly, my mind racing. I needed to think, to process what I had just witnessed. As I walked back to our room, my emotions oscillated between fury and heartbreak. How could she do this to me? To us? Our life together had seemed so perfect. That day passed in a blur. Jessica returned to our room, her face flushed and eyes bright. She acted as if nothing had happened, but I could see the guilt lingering in her gaze. I played along, pretending to be oblivious, all the while formulating a plan. I wanted revenge, not the kind that would land me in jail, but the kind that would ensure she felt every ounce of the pain she had caused me. The next morning, I confronted her. "Jessica, we need to talk," I said, my voice cold and distant. She looked at me, a flicker of fear crossing her features. "What's wrong, Peter?" "I know," I said simply. Her eyes widened. "Know what?" "About you and the bartender. I saw you." For a moment, she was speechless. Then, she tried to laugh it off. "Peter, you're imagining things. I was just having a drink with him." "Save it," I snapped. "I saw everything. And now, you're going to pay." Jessica's face turned pale. "Peter, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I said, my voice a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "You betrayed me. And now, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." She tried to plead, to beg for forgiveness, but I was done. I packed my bags and left, but not before making a few calls and sending some well-timed messages. By the time I boarded my flight back home, Jessica's infidelity was already becoming the talk of the hotel. As I sat in my seat, the plane ascending into the sky, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Jessica had torn apart our life together, and now I would dismantle hers piece by piece. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of strategic moves and calculated actions. I knew that to truly ruin her reputation, I had to be smart. I began gathering evidence, documenting everything. Photos, messages, anything that could prove her betrayal. I reached out to mutual friends, subtly planting seeds of doubt and sharing my story. But it wasn't enough to just expose her. I needed to hit her where it hurt the most, her career, her social standing. Jessica prided herself on her image, her connections. She was well-liked, respected even. I intended to change that. My next move was to leak the evidence to the right people. Anonymously, of course. I sent the photos and messages to her colleagues, her boss, even her family. The fallout was immediate. Her reputation was in tatters, whispers and gossip spreading like wildfire. Jessica tried to fight back, to deny everything, but the evidence was irrefutable. She was suspended from her job pending an investigation, her friends began to distance themselves, and her family was devastated. I watched from the sidelines, a mix of satisfaction and lingering sadness in my heart. This wasn't how I had imagined our life together would end, but it was the only way I knew how to cope with the betrayal. One night, as I sat in my apartment, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jessica. "Peter, please. Let's talk. I need to explain." I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to hear her out, to understand why she had done it. But another part of me knew that no explanation could ever undo the damage. I turned off my phone and set it aside. This was just the beginning. Jessica had started this war, and I intended to finish it. The next steps would be even more calculated, more devastating. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. As I lay in bed that night, a sense of calm washed over me. The path ahead was clear. This was my new reality, and I was ready to embrace it. Jessica had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. One step at a time, I would ensure she felt the full weight of her actions. And so, with a heart hardened by betrayal and a mind focused on revenge, I closed my eyes and drifted into a restless sleep. The game had only just begun, and I was determined to win. The sun was setting as I walked into O'Malley's pub, the familiar ding of the bell over the door signaling my arrival. The dimly lit interior was a sharp contrast to the brightness outside, but I found comfort in its shadowy corners. This was my sanctuary, a place to think and plan my next moves. I took a seat at the bar, nodding to the bartender, Mike, who had become something of a confidant in recent weeks. He was an older man with a grizzled beard and a knack for keeping secrets. "Hey, Peter," he greeted, sliding a cold beer in my direction. "How's it going?" "Could be better, Mike," I replied, taking a long sip. "But I'm making progress." "Good to hear," he said, leaning on the bar. "You know, revenge is a tricky thing. You sure this is the path you want to take?" I nodded. "I don't see any other way. She needs to pay for what she did." Mike sighed but didn't push further. He understood the pain of betrayal, having gone through his own divorce years ago. "Just be careful, kid." I nodded again, lost in my thoughts. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a message from Rachel, a mutual friend of Jessica and me. She had been one of the few to stand by me since the truth came out. "Rachel, hey, can we meet? I have something you might want to know." I quickly replied, agreeing to meet her at a nearby cafe. Rachel had always been a straight shooter, and if she had information, I needed to hear it. The cafe was bustling with evening activity when I arrived. I spotted Rachel at a corner table, her red hair a beacon in the crowd. She waved me over, her expression serious. "Peter," she greeted, her voice low. "I heard something at work today that you need to know about." I sat down, leaning in. "What is it?" "Jessica's been talking to a lawyer," she said, her eyes darting around as if to make sure no one was listening. "She's planning to sue you for defamation." I felt a surge of anger. Defamation? She cheated on me, and now she's trying to turn this around? Rachel nodded. She's claiming that the evidence you leaked is fake, that you're just trying to ruin her because you're bitter. I clenched my fists, the rage boiling inside me. She's unbelievable. Rachel reached across the table, touching my hand. Peter, you need to be smart about this. She has resources, connections. You need to find a way to protect yourself. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. You're right. But how do I fight back? Rachel hesitated for a moment. I know someone who might be able to help. A private investigator. He used to work with my uncle. He's good at digging up dirt, the kind of dirt that can destroy a person if it gets out. I raised an eyebrow. You think he'd take the job? For the right price, yes, she said. And if it means exposing Jessica for who she really is, I think he'd be willing. The next day, I met Rachel's contact, a man named Frank. He was in his 50s, with a sharp gaze and a no-nonsense demeanor. We met at a small, nondescript office in the city, the kind of place where secrets were meant to be kept. Peter, Frank greeted, extending a hand. Rachel filled me in on your situation. Sounds like you've got quite the mess on your hands. That's one way to put it, I replied, shaking his hand. Can you help? Frank leaned back in his chair, studying me. I can. But you need to understand, this isn't going to be pretty. What you're asking for requires digging into every corner of her life. Are you prepared for that? I nodded without hesitation. I am. All right then, he said, pulling out a notepad. I'll need everything you have on her. Emails, texts, photos, anything that can give me a starting point. I handed over a folder, meticulously organized with all the evidence I had gathered. Frank flipped through it, nodding occasionally. This is a good start, he said. I'll begin my investigation right away. But remember, once we go down this road, there's no turning back. I understand, I said, my resolve unwavering. Over the next few weeks, Frank kept me updated on his progress. He was thorough, uncovering details about Jessica's past that I had never known. There were financial discrepancies, suspicious connections, and even rumors of previous affairs. Every piece of information was like a brick in the wall I was building against her. Meanwhile, Jessica's attempts to sue me for defamation were gaining traction. She was relentless, using every resource at her disposal to paint me as the villain. The tension was palpable, the lines clearly drawn. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, Frank called. Peter, I've found something big. Something that could turn this whole thing around. What is it? I asked, my heart pounding. Meet me at the office tomorrow morning. This is too sensitive to discuss over the phone. The next morning, I arrived at Frank's office with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. He greeted me with a grim expression, leading me to a back room where he had laid out documents and photographs. Jessica has been hiding a lot, he began. But the most significant thing is this. He handed me a set of documents, and as I read through them, my eyes widened in shock. She was embezzling funds from her company, Frank explained. And she has connections to some very unsavory characters. If this gets out, it won't just ruin her reputation, it could lead to criminal charges. I felt a sense of vindication mixed with fear. This was the ammunition I needed, but it was dangerous. How do we use this? I asked. We need to be careful, Frank said. If we release this information the wrong way, it could backfire. We need a plan. Over the next few hours, we devised a strategy. We would leak the information anonymously to key individuals within Jessica's company and the media. The goal was to create a chain reaction that would dismantle her life piece by piece. The next week was a whirlwind. The information Frank uncovered spread like wildfire. Jessica's company launched an internal investigation, and the media caught wind of the scandal. Her pristine image was shattered, and she found herself at the center of a growing storm. One evening, as I was walking back from O'Malley's, my phone rang. It was Jessica. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Peter," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, can we talk? I know you're behind this." I felt a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. "There's nothing to talk about, Jessica. You brought this on yourself." "Peter, please," she pleaded. "I'm losing everything. My job, my friends, my family. I can't take this anymore." I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. "You should have thought about that before you betrayed me." With that, I hung up, feeling a sense of closure. This was just the beginning. The war was far from over, but I was ready for whatever came next. Jessica had underestimated me, and now she was paying the price. As I walked into the night, I felt a strange sense of peace. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. This was my story, and I was determined to see it through to the end. The fallout from Jessica's scandal was more intense than I had imagined. Every day brought new headlines and whispered conversations. Jessica's face was plastered on the front pages, her reputation crumbling faster than I could have hoped. But with every victory came an escalating sense of danger. I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. One evening, as I sat in O'Malley's, Mike slid a newspaper across the bar. "Have you seen this?" he asked, his brow furrowed. The headline read, "Embezzlement Scandal Rocks Local Company, High-Profile Divorce in the Mix." Beneath it was a photo of Jessica, looking disheveled and distressed. It should have felt like a triumph, but instead, it filled me with a gnawing unease. "Yeah, I've seen it," I replied, taking a sip of my drink. "She's not going to take this lying down, you know," Mike said, his voice low. "You need to be prepared for her counterattack." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "Peter, we need to meet." "Now," she said, her tone urgent. Rachel was already seated when I arrived at the cafe, her expression tense. "Peter, things are getting serious," she said without preamble. "Jessica's hired a top-tier law firm. They're digging into your past, trying to find anything they can use against you." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "She's claiming you're harassing her, that you've been stalking her ever since the divorce. And she's got witnesses lined up to back her story." "That's insane," I said, my voice rising. "I haven't done anything like that." Rachel reached out, her hand covering mine. "I believe you, but you need to be smart. Frank can help, but you also need a lawyer. Someone who can counter these claims and protect you." I nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I'll call Frank. And I know just the lawyer for the job." The next morning, I met with Frank and my new lawyer, Samantha. She was sharp, with a reputation for being ruthless in court. Exactly what I needed. "We need to go on the offensive," Samantha said, her eyes flashing with determination. "If Jessica wants to play dirty, we'll play dirtier." Frank leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I've dug up more on Jessica. There are things she wouldn't want to come to light. Affairs, shady business deals, it's all there. We can use this." Samantha nodded. "Good. We'll need everything. Peter, I need you to stay low for now. Let us handle the public side of things." I agreed, feeling a mixture of relief and trepidation. This was becoming more intense than I had anticipated, but I was in too deep to back out now. Over the next few days, Samantha and Frank worked tirelessly. They countered Jessica's harassment claims with solid alibis and eyewitnesses. Frank dug deeper into Jessica's past, uncovering more dirt. Every revelation was like a blow to her carefully constructed facade. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, my phone rang. It was Frank. "Peter, we've got a problem," he said, his voice tense. "Jessica's escalated things. She's not just going after you legally, she's hired someone to follow you. A private investigator. She's spying on me? I asked, incredulous. Yes. And they've already taken some photos that could be twisted to support her claims. You need to be careful. Don't do anything that could be misconstrued. The thought of being watched sent a chill down my spine. But it also fueled my determination. Thanks for the heads up, Frank. I'll be careful. The next few days were a blur of strategy meetings and cautious movements. Samantha was relentless, dismantling Jessica's claims piece by piece. Frank continued to dig, each new discovery adding another weapon to our arsenal. One evening, as I walked back to my apartment, I noticed a man lingering near the entrance. He was dressed casually, but something about him seemed off. I quickened my pace, my heart racing. As I approached, he stepped forward. "Peter," he asked, his voice calm. "Who are you?" I demanded, keeping my distance. "I'm just doing my job," he said, pulling out a camera. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" I glared at him. "I have nothing to say to you." He shrugged. "Fair enough. But just so you know, Jessica's not going to stop. She's desperate." I turned and walked away, the encounter leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. This was getting out of hand. But I couldn't back down now. The following week, Samantha called me into her office. She looked unusually pleased. "We have a new development," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. Inside were documents linking Jessica to illegal activities far worse than embezzlement. Money laundering, connections to organized crime, it was a goldmine. "Where did you get this?" I asked, amazed. "Frank's sources are very reliable," Samantha replied. "This is the leverage we needed. We can end this." The next morning, we held a press conference. Samantha, ever the professional, presented the evidence with precision and clarity. The media ate it up, and Jessica's already fragile reputation shattered completely. That evening, as I sat in O'Malley's, Mike handed me a drink. "To victory," he said with a grin. I raised my glass, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. To victory. But even as we celebrated, I knew this wasn't the end. Jessica was down, but she wasn't out. I had won this battle, but the war was far from over. And I needed to be ready for whatever came next. The next few days were quieter. Jessica had gone silent, her legal team scrambling to handle the fallout. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. I was right. One evening, as I was walking home, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Hello. Peter, it's Jessica," came the voice I least expected to hear. She sounded broken, defeated. "What do you want, Jessica?" I asked, my voice hard. "I need to see you. Please. Just one last time. I need to explain." I hesitated. This could be a trap. But something in her voice made me curious. "Fine. Where?" "Meet me at the old pier, tomorrow at noon." I agreed, hanging up and immediately calling Frank. "Jessica wants to meet. I think she's up to something." Frank sighed. "Be careful, Peter. She's desperate, and desperate people do desperate things." The next day, I arrived at the pier, the wind cold and biting. Jessica was already there, looking out at the water. She turned as I approached, her face pale and drawn. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "Make it quick, Jessica," I replied, crossing my arms. She took a deep breath. "I never wanted any of this, Peter. The affair, the lies, it got out of hand. And now, I don't know how to fix it." "It's too late for that," I said, my voice cold. "You've destroyed everything." "I know," she whispered, tears in her eyes. But there's something you need to know. The people I was involved with, they're dangerous. If they find out what you know, they'll come after you. I felt a chill run down my spine. What are you talking about? I'm saying you're in danger. They know about you, Peter. They know everything. Before I could respond, a car screeched to a halt nearby. Men in suits stepped out, their intentions clear. Jessica's warning was too late. "Run," she screamed, and I took off, my heart pounding. Shots rang out, the pier erupting into chaos. As I sprinted down the boardwalk, I realized this was no longer just about revenge. This was a fight for survival. And I was caught in the middle of a storm far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. The war had just escalated, and I needed to find a way out before it consumed me completely. Bullets whizzed past as I darted behind a stack of wooden crates. My mind raced. Jessica's warning echoed in my ears. I peered around the corner, trying to gauge my next move. The men were closing in, their footsteps heavy on the wooden planks of the pier. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I fished it out, seeing a message from Frank. "Frank, get to the end of the pier. A boat will be waiting." I glanced back, calculating the distance. The pier stretched out into the dark water, and the boat was my only chance. I took a deep breath, then sprinted towards the end. "Stop him," one of the men shouted, but I didn't look back. I pushed my legs harder, each step bringing me closer to the edge and to safety. The boat roared to life, its engine cutting through the silence. As I reached the end, a strong hand grabbed mine, pulling me aboard. I looked up to see Frank, his expression grim. "Hold on," he said, gunning the engine. The boat lurched forward, leaving the men shouting angrily on the pier. The wind whipped through my hair as we sped away, the city lights fading into the distance. I slumped onto a bench, trying to catch my breath. "That was close," Frank muttered, steering the boat towards a secluded cove. I nodded, still processing everything. "Jessica said those men are dangerous." "Who are they?" Frank sighed. "Jessica got involved with a criminal syndicate. Money laundering, smuggling, she was in deep. When you exposed her, you didn't just ruin her reputation, you threatened their operations." "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded, anger rising. "I didn't know until it was too late," Frank admitted. "But now we have to figure out our next move." As we docked in the cove, I saw Rachel waiting. She rushed over, her face etched with worry. "Peter. Thank God you're okay," she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "I'm fine," I said, pulling back. "But we need to end this, once and for all." We regrouped at a safe house Frank had set up. It was a small, unassuming cabin nestled in the woods, far from prying eyes. As we sat around the table, Frank laid out our options. "Jessica's warning was genuine," he began. "The syndicate will come after you. But we have leverage, the information we've gathered can bring them down." Rachel nodded. "We need to go public. Expose everything. It's the only way to protect Peter and put an end to this." "But we need a plan," I added. "A way to release the information safely." Frank pulled out a map, pointing to a location. "There's a journalist I trust. He's been working on exposing the syndicate for years. If we give him the evidence, he can blow this wide open." We spent the next few hours finalizing the plan. It was risky, but it was our only shot. The next morning, we set out for the meeting point, a secluded cafe on the outskirts of the city. The drive was tense, each of us on edge. Frank drove while Rachel and I kept watch. As we arrived, I spotted the journalist, a man named Marcus, sitting at a corner table. We approached cautiously, Frank introducing us. "Marcus, this is Peter. He has the information you need." Marcus nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "Let's make this quick." I handed over the files, detailing everything, Jessica's involvement, the syndicate's operations, and the evidence Frank had uncovered. Marcus flipped through the documents, his expression growing more serious. "This is explosive," he said. "I'll need to verify some of this, but once I do, this will bring them down." "How long will it take?" I asked, anxiety gnawing at me. "Give me 24 hours, Marcus replied. "I'll get it done." We left the cafe, a mix of hope and fear filling the air. All we could do now was wait. The next day was a blur. We stayed in the safe house, waiting for Marcus's call. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, the phone rang. It was Marcus. "It's done. The story will be live in an hour. Get ready for the fallout." We gathered around the TV, watching as the news broke. Marcus had done his job well. The syndicate's operations were exposed, their crimes laid bare for the world to see. Jessica was implicated, her role undeniable. It was a victory, but a hollow one. As we watched, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously. "Unknown, meet me at the old pier. Come alone. J." My heart raced. "It's Jessica. She wants to meet." "Peter, it could be a trap," Rachel warned. "I have to go," I said, determination in my voice. "I need answers." I arrived at the pier, the same one where the chaos had erupted. Jessica stood at the end, her back to me. I approached slowly, my guard up. "Jessica," I called out. She turned, tears streaming down her face. "Peter, I'm sorry." "It's too late for that," I said, my voice cold. "Why did you get involved with them?" "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "They threatened me. I thought I could handle it, but it spiraled out of control." "You could have come to me," I said, frustration boiling over. "We could have faced it together." "I was scared," she admitted. "And then you started your revenge." I didn't know what to do. We stood in silence, the weight of our actions hanging between us. Finally, Jessica spoke. "They're coming for me, Peter. I don't have much time." A sense of dread filled me. "What do you mean?" "I'm a liability now," she said, her voice breaking. "They'll kill me to keep me quiet." Before I could respond, a black car screeched to a halt nearby. Men in suits emerged, their intentions clear. Jessica looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Run, Peter. Save yourself." But I couldn't leave her. Not like this. I grabbed her hand, pulling her towards the boat Frank had left for us. We sprinted down the pier, the men closing in. As we reached the boat, gunshots rang out. I pushed Jessica aboard, gunning the engine. We sped away, bullets hitting the water around us. "Hold on!" I shouted, steering the boat towards the open sea. We raced across the water, the city shrinking behind us. Jessica clung to me, her fear palpable. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Somewhere safe," I replied, though I wasn't sure where that was. As we left the city behind, I realized this was the beginning of a new chapter. We were on the run, but we had each other. And as long as we stayed together, we could face whatever came next. The war was over, but the battle for our survival had just begun. And I was ready for whatever lay ahead.